Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Nutrition for Vegan Runners podcast. I'm Ellie, founder of Vojo Health and club nutritionist at Vegan Runners UK. And today I'm here with Callum Weir. Did I say that right? Weir?
You did, yeah.
Okay, good. He is a plant-based nutritionist and founder of Yumfu, which is his plant-based nutrition coaching company. So welcome, Callum.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. Let's just dive straight in. Today we're going to be talking about protein, and you really focus on helping people get enough of the nutrients they need from a whole food plant-based diet. So the problem is I speak to a lot of runners and actually many vegans who simply aren't getting enough protein. Is this an issue you come across in your practice too?
I think I think people think it's an issue more than it actually is an issue. So many people come to me being like, "Oh, I'm not getting enough protein," because they're seeing what's on the back of a box of food. So let's say they're getting like lentils, they'll be like, "Oh, 100 grams is only like 100 grams is only 7 grams of protein." And they're like, "Oh, like that's not enough compared to what they may have been eating beforehand, such like a chicken breast." But obviously, you're adding food over time. You're not just having lentils on their own, and they don't really realize that in other foods, other vegetables, there is protein as well. So if you're mixing that with just your smaller vegetables as well, such like carrots, kale, amaranth, quinoa, all those bits and pieces, they all have protein in, just in various different quantities. So people just assume that because these minuscule foods that you don't really think about having protein, they're like, "Oh, I'm probably not getting enough." When you actually are, and the more calories you eat, the more protein you get. So if you're eating enough calories throughout the day, you should actually be getting enough protein through these other food sources. It's just some foods are higher and lower in many aminos than more. Um, and I do get so many people coming to me being like, "Oh, Callum, I can't get enough protein." And then when we actually look into and define that actual food ratios of what they're having per day, so let's say they're having 100 grams of oats in the morning, and then they're adding like, let's say, hemp seeds, they're adding a banana, they're adding like sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, all those, and then at lunchtime they're having like a Buddha bowl, quinoa, a bit of tofu, various other bits and pieces on top, and then a dinner which could be, I don't know, a shepherd's pie mixed with like lentils and chickpeas, all those different foods. And they've actually worked out because they didn't think of everything else. They didn't think of a potato in a shepherd's pie having protein. They didn't think of the carrots in a Buddha bowl having protein, just in small amounts. That they were actually building up and building up protein throughout the day, and were actually getting more than they actually thought they were. So they added up to, let's say, maybe 40 grams, which is a very little amount for somebody that's especially an athlete, let alone trying to live. So I only think that they're taking 40 grams in, where it's actually been around 60 grams. It's just that there's foods they don't realize have it in them.
That is a very good point, because when we think about protein sources, you're totally right. It's like, what am I replacing my meat with? Beans. Okay, how many beans am I eating throughout the day? Like 2 portions. That's not enough protein. And you're totally right. It's like you do have to take into account everything you're eating.
Yeah.
But I guess that leads us to another problem, in that it's a pain in the ass to track your nutrient intake, right? It takes a lot of time.
I hate it.
And yeah, me too. I think I've managed like a running total of a week of tracking my nutrient intake. You know, I go into a chronometer occasionally and see, and like just check I'm hitting everything I need. But so how can you make sure that you're getting enough protein from a whole food diet without tracking anything? You say that, you know, actually sometimes it's quite common that people are eating enough already, but how do we make sure?
See, that's a hard one, especially if you're not going to track. I would actually advise for at least the first week, maybe 2 weeks, if you're new to a plant-based diet, if you're very new to it, to track. But only for a few weeks, because once you've done it for a few weeks, it then becomes a second nature of the food that you're actually consuming. So For instance, let's say you're going on Chronometer or MyFitnessPal, something like that, and you're tracking these nutrients. Let's say you're doing, I know, like 200 grams of lentils, 200 grams of chickpeas, all that. You're over time, you'll develop that kind of intuition about food, and what you're actually getting from these foods. Um, the only way to really not track is to eat enough calories, because you will be getting enough through that calorie intake. But then again, that doesn't help if you're going towards a goal. If you've got like a goal as a runner or a bodybuilder, then tracking is probably crucial. Not so much runners, because obviously you want to be obviously eating more carbs than you are protein. Um, just so you can fuel yourself on these kind of long distance runs. If you're a bodybuilder as such, then having protein is kind of, you're going to have maybe a 50-30-20 split with carbs and fats. So protein is your main resource. So tracking it is crucial. Um, but if you don't have a goal as such, if you don't have a goal in fitness and you're just trying to live your daily diet, like your daily life on a daily diet, then there isn't really a need to track. Unless, for instance, you're very worried, then I would say obviously the first 2 weeks, just put in different foods, play around with it, and then you'll kind of get an inkling of what you will be getting. But obviously, we also need to realize that not all protein is built the same. So I wouldn't advise consistently eating something like lentils, for instance, because yes, while they are all high in protein, the amino acids inside, there's 9 of them. Um, 1 or 2 are lower in, let's say, valine or leucine, which will affect your growth. It will affect your nervous system. It will affect many other bits around your body. So if you then mix it, so that would class as incomplete protein. So you really want to know what to kind of mix and match to build up proteins. So if you have lentils, you'd mix it with, let's say, I don't know, spinach, kale. They will have protein in them, just smaller amounts. So let's say the lentils, for instance, were not the 9 amino acids were all at 100% apart from one. So that, let's say it's 80%. And then that spinach, a chickpea or whatever had that 20% hypothetically, then you would have completed a complete protein. So you need to be mixing your foods. You can't just rely on foods such as lentils on their own. Result-wise, you're going to come into a lot of difficulties, especially if you're looking to build muscle, if you're looking to kind of recover from endurance events. If you're not eating the right amount, then you will start to develop difficulties. You won't be able to recover, and it'll be a minefield. But if you're eating enough calories, you will get it. If you have an endurance event, a bodybuilding event, then please track your calories, at least for like the first week or so, just so you can get your head around it.
Yeah, it's incredibly easy as an endurance athlete as well. If you're training for races or whatever, it's actually quite easy to underfuel. And you're right, if you're eating enough calories, then you probably, and you're getting protein into every meal, and you know like the good sources of protein, then you probably don't have to worry so much. But there is always the danger that actually you're not getting enough calories, in which case
Mm.
you're probably not getting enough protein either. How often do you see that happening?
Oh, all the so right. I mainly work with athletes, so I work with bodybuilders and endurance runners. Um, I find out that endurance runners are trying to run on 2,000 calories, 2,500 calories, and wondering why they're not completing um, the task they put ahead of themselves, or they're going into like races and wondering why they're lacking of energy halfway through, and you're depleting your resources of protein, carbs, fats, all of those. It's not just a protein. Um, and then not realizing that they should be eating, especially if you're doing like what, a marathon, 2,000 calories isn't gonna that's not gonna cut it. Like 3,000 to 3,500 maybe. If you're doing an endurance event in the 4,000s, um, but it really depends on the goal. But if you're gonna go into an event or something with a very low calorie range, you're gonna go into a deficit very quickly, and your storages of energy is gonna go down. You won't be able to recover as easier. It's gonna be an awful thing. Um, and I get that a lot. People, especially just working out in general, not even if it's a athletic event, not even if it's bodybuilding, just in general, going to the gym or just on a day-to-day basis, feeling fatigued, wondering why, and being like, oh, you're actually eating 1,400 calories because there's a calorie density. And people don't realize that obviously what you may be used to, if it's a meat diet, like let's say a chicken, that a chicken can hold 500, 600 calories. If you're going to, let's say, vegan junk food, if you're eating like a Beyond Burger for such, that could be 400, 500 calories with the bun as well. And then you get like a whole Buddha bowl full of like rice, quinoa, carrots, all sorts, and you're looking at maybe 300 calories. And then because people were so enticed by portion size, they don't realize that this thing that contains so many nutrients has actually little calories. So you can actually eat more, feel fuller, and actually be having lower calories. So for one, it's great for somebody looking to lose weight, but at the same time, if you're looking to achieve a goal in an athletic industry, then eating more is vital. And yet it may be hard at first. Um, but you're really gonna have to push yourself in there to kind of keep eating because you never know. And this is why it's also important to track. Because if you're not tracking those calories, you could be underfueling for all you know.
This is such a good point, and especially if you're doing an endurance event or you're training for an endurance event, so you're covering a lot of miles or with whatever you're doing with running or whatever else, then sometimes it's difficult to eat enough because you're not actually hungry. When you exercise a lot, you kind of, when you're finished, it's like actually a lot of the time the last thing you want to do is eat straight away, and eat a big meal because it inhibits your hunger. So you are right that tracking is important, especially if you're doing a lot of mileage. How do you eat enough when you don't feel hungry, and especially on the day that you're actually doing races?
Yeah, I guess you don't really want to be eating like 3,000 calories before you start doing a run. It's not great. It's probably not going to work well for you. But that is also the same with most diets. You don't want to be eating much before you run anyway. So if anything, when you're going towards an event such as an endurance event, you want to be kind of loading up with your proteins and carbs a few days beforehand. So you're going to have that energy supply there. So you may want to be eating over quite a few thousand calories, just so on that. Although you'll be burning them on those days, probably not as much because you're probably not relaxing, but at least having small exercise before the event, eating numerous amounts days before, so you have that energy stored inside you, to burn off during the endurance event. Because I think that's the only way you can really, like, unless you're doing it in an afternoon event, which is very rare. Um, you should be loading up on everything beforehand. And I would say that even if it's during snacks, even if you're doing high calorie snacks during the day, let's say hummus, for instance, hummus very high in calories, very high in fats, and very high in proteins, but the healthy fats. So as well as carbs. So eating things like that, just on crackers, for instance, with the hummus, a bit of avocado, maybe have like a grain sprouted bread with avocado, anything like that. Just smaller intakes that have higher calories. That way, you're not like eating numerous amounts of like lower density foods. Get the find out where the high density foods are, such like almond butter, peanut butter, um, avocados, seeds. Having those and eating them, that way you're creating a higher calorie intake for little amounts.
You're totally right. And yeah, the high fat foods are the most calorie dense because fat is a smaller, more dense molecule than carbohydrate. And yeah, you don't want to be eating large amounts of fat before your run because it's not good for burning for quick energy, but it is great for getting those calories in throughout the day. And I know from personal experience that when I started adding loads more whole food fats to my diet, I felt so much better. And it's very easy to not get enough of those, as you said. Like if you eat like a Buddha bowl with all your different vegetables and salad or whatever else, it's kind of easy to forget that you need these high density, high nutrient dense foods.
Mm. I think that's what people forget is that there's this nutrient density involved, and it isn't
Mm.
just kind of eyesight and hoping for the best. You need to know what's actually in this food, the density of it, and that goes the same with any diet. That's not just vegans or whole food plant-based people.
I think we get through like a big pot of peanut butter in my house, at least, one or two a week. I mean, there are a lot of people in my house. I'm just going to preface this: there's 10 of us, so it's kind of justified, but still, we do love our peanut butter. Um, okay, so thinking about nutrient density and how you actually get enough protein in amongst everything else, what are your thoughts on protein powders? Because, this is sold as a great solution to get extra protein in your diet without all the extra bulk of the fiber and everything else in the whole foods.
So I'm not against it. I'm not for it. I'm in the middle. It really depends on your goal. If you're looking to be a pro bodybuilder, yeah, go ahead. Take your protein powder. It's lower in carbs, so you're going to get that definition. Um, so you kind of need to work out what you really need it for. Do you need it? Um, and the thing is, what we're doing with protein powder, we're extracting the nutrients. So we're extracting, especially with it's normally BCAAs, which are valine, leucine, and isoleucine, which are free amino acids. So we're extracting those and putting them in a powder. We're ripping apart the rest of the protein and just putting these into an isolated powder. So that's all you are getting, which is great. Yeah, you're building muscle with it, but you also need the other seven. Oh, six, sorry. You need the other six protein somewhere else in your diet. You can't just be living on these free these protein molecules. Um, and also you're stripping away the other nutrients from other foods. So let's say you had black beans. Yes, full of protein. It's also full of like calcium. It's also full of zinc, magnesium, and other foods. You're not getting other elements, vitamins and minerals. You are not getting that on a protein powder. So if you're extracting and you're only drinking this, hopefully you're not only drinking this. Hopefully you're eating other foods with it. But if you are having this, you're going to run into problems as much as any other person that's doing this. Whereas you want the vitamins, you want the minerals, you want the other pieces of protein. So for instance, if you wanted 100 grams of protein, yes, you could do 2 scoops of protein powder and make a smaller meal with, let's say, 100 grams of lentils, and you probably would have hit your protein 100%. But you could also have throughout the day, you could have a cup of black beans, which is 14.2 grams, a cup of chickpeas as well, 10.7 grams, maybe a bit of tempeh, depending how you're feeling on minimally processed foods, but is just fermented soybean, which a cup of that is 33 grams of protein. 1 cup of lentils, 17.9 grams. You've got your edamame, like a cup of that, 18.5. And 1 cup of mushrooms, 5.7 grams. And in that, you've created 100 grams of protein right there, and that could be varied throughout the day. And your carbs for that is quite low. That's 94.4 grams of carbs, and your fat is 32. And for all of that, you've got 1,100 calories. Obviously, that's not enough to just kind of enjoy yourself throughout the day. 1,100 is not enough for anyone unless you're a toddler. But that's 100 grams without anything else you're eating. So you can then bulk up on whatever you want after that, and you'll be absolutely fine.
I have to ask, do you memorize these numbers?
No.
Or were you reading them? Tell me you were reading them. Okay, good.
I know some of them off by heart, but I had to write them down because I know the top four.
Okay.
So yeah, no, I was reading them. But that's the thing, like it's very easy to get and that is a complete protein set as well. So all those together creates a full entire protein. But for 1,100 calories, it's not enough. So anything else on top of that is topping it up completely.
It sounds a lot tastier than the protein powder version, I have to say.
I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of protein powders. I've not found one that I enjoy. This is pre-vegan and vegan. There's not one I've liked that hasn't given me some sort of issue. Obviously, protein powder beforehand was whey. Whey, I'm lactose intolerant. It wasn't great. And then Anything that I found on a plant-based diet, protein powder, I'm just not a fan of the taste or grittiness, so I'd rather just stay away from it. Also, you have to realize that these protein powders have a hell of a lot of other chemicals and stuff in them than your actual normal food. So if you look on the back of a protein powder packet, there is a list longer than your arms of stuff that's in it. And half the time, if you don't know what those words are, you could be putting anything into your body.
This is such a good point, and it's not even only the stuff that you read on the ingredients list. For example, with soya, there are so many myths around soya, but generally they're all wrong. Like whole food soya and tofu and tempeh and and soya milk, they're all great. The one soya product that I would avoid is a poor quality soya based protein powder, because they do tend to have what's the word I'm looking for? What's the word I'm looking for?
GMOs? Is that the one?
Maybe. But I don't want to say toxic. You know what I mean. Extra things in there that you don't want.
Mm. That's the thing. Like once you need to kind of see where these things are coming from. So there is very cheap ones out there that are like £10. But if it's £10, do you really want to be sticking it in your body? When it's a bag, it's like it's a few kilogram bag and it's a £10. Like whereas there's some really good ones out there that are going for a lot more, and you have to. It's the same with clothing. If you wouldn't go out and buy the cheapest shoes, knowing they're going to last what a few weeks, you would go for something a bit more expensive, but it will last you a lot longer. And that's the same with nutrition in general, let alone just protein. Um, you want to keep yourself. You don't want to be going for like the detox teas or the supplementation of certain vitamins and minerals when you can easily get them from food. You're just taking a longer route to get them.
Mm. You've mentioned BCAAs a couple of times. What's important about those? And I mean, you've said that we don't really, if we eat a normal diet with enough calories, then you're probably getting enough. But is are BCAAs something that we do have to plan a little bit? Is it something people should be aware of?
I think it's something people should be aware of. Um,
Mm.
but I think it's the same awareness that you should have with all aminos from protein. You need to know where you're getting it from. Um, the only way these three are only specific for muscle building. Um, if you don't have those, you can't build muscle. And those three together combined create the help that your body needs when creating micro tears to fix yourself. Obviously, the other aminos get involved at some point, but these three are the main ones for muscle building. Um, so yes, they are important if you're looking to become the next big bodybuilder. Yes, you need to be working on these a lot more. You need to be finding where to get them from certain foods. You need to be getting those strands. If you want to take it in a BCA in a protein formula, then yes, that's great. But you need to know where those things are coming from, where you get them from foods, without just sticking to what you know, as in just drinking something and it's there. Um, but this is specifically for muscles. And this is the same as if you are running. Well, if you're going to be running, I don't know, 50 miles, you're going to have some micro tears in your legs. It's going to
Mm-hmm.
happen. So yes, you need to know for your recovery where these things are coming from. But it's not as important as knowing where everything's coming from. So all nine. It's just those ones. If you're wanting to build more muscle than anything else, it's those three: valine, leucine, and isoleucine. Otherwise, you don't really need to worry. It's just if you are going towards a bigger goal.
What are the top foods with BCAAs that we should be thinking about, or just making sure that we're getting them in our diet, especially after a long run or a lot of
Um,
exercise?
it's not it's so much so the same kind of foods that I mentioned before. So kind of like your chickpeas, your right, soy products for one. They are classed as a complete protein. Um, so if you're going to get your tempeh, your tofu, your natto, your soybeans, your edamame, um, They are all in there at 100%. If you're gonna hit up your grains, so you got quinoa, you have spirulina, you have um, buckwheat, which is high in those three. The same with peanuts, peanut butter, um, also almonds, millet, mushrooms. This also depends on the type of mushroom. I'm not just going to go down to like your local supermarket and pick up your normal chestnut mushrooms, because all mushrooms are different. Um, Depending on the style. So let's say you have oyster mushrooms, yes, higher in those too. Your normal chestnut or button mushroom will be lower. And it's oats as well. Oats, and asparagus and potatoes. Two things that wouldn't think have those kind of proteins in.
I would really love to see the your kitchen cupboards to see what you have in stock. I bet it's great.
Oh, it
It's
is.
like a
It is
vegan theme
full.
park in your kitchen, I'm pretty sure.
It really is. Like I have cupboards, of nuts, seeds, different different grains. I don't like. I like to mix it up every day. I don't like to have the same thing every day. Um, Also for your gut microbes.
That is such a key thing, isn't it? Like, just vary your foods. You're talking about getting all the different amino acids, yes, and also giving your gut microbes a little bit of a variation. Just variety is the main thing. And God, that's like, it's such an unsexy recommendation, isn't it? Just eat a variety of foods. But man, it's so important.
It really is. And to be fair, once you try, well, the best thing with trying a variety of different foods is you get to experience things that you probably wouldn't have tried before. Because I know when I first swapped over to a plant-based diet, well, I gave up like five, six things, which like, meat, three different types of meat, basically, maybe some chicken, turkey, beef, and some dairy products. So maybe five, six things. But then having that chance to try a variety of different things, I've tried about 5,000 new things. So what you're doing there is you're extending your knowledge of foods, you're trying new things, you're trying new flavors, new textures, and actually experimenting, experiencing new foods. And which is great for the diversity when it comes to your body's health and your gut as well. You're just creating a diverse package for it to just kind of see what works for you.
And it means you're more adaptable too, right? I mean, if you're used to a wide variety of foods, then, when you're out of your comfort zone, when you're going away somewhere, when you're doing something different to where you normally are, you're just more able to adapt to it. And it's the same with fueling for exercise. You can be very adapted to fasted running, for example, but then you're really bad at running fueled, and vice versa. So it's just about giving your body that variety in all
Absolutely.
cases.
That's the thing. You just need to test and track everything that you're doing and seeing what works for you.
I like that because it's so important to remember that you're different to everyone else and you just need to experiment, like see what works for you because don't take anyone's advice. Just like try things out that you hear or that like a nutritionist of course or a dietitian would recommend, but if it doesn't work for you then that's also fine.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like a lot of people come to me being like, "Oh, I want to fuel myself with protein, but lentils aren't working for me." That's fine. Kick
Mm.
lentils out. There's a thousand other things out there, but don't be sticking with one thing or just experiment with everything. Like if lentils don't work for you, I know for a lot of people they do make gassy. Screw them out the window. You can have something else. Um, but it is just finding what works for you because you are different, as you say, to everybody else on this planet. You're a unique human being.
Talking of protein, I know that I was always eating before, like, I was always eating what was recommended, the amount of protein on a vegan diet, but I was still actually always hungry. Like, I never felt totally full, and I would always want a snack, and I'd always have big portions that made me feel uncomfortable. Then I'd be hungry like an hour later or something. And I was eating protein. I had checked that I was getting enough. And for me it just kind of wasn't enough. So I started adding more protein. And it turns out that I have a gene which means that I tend to eat more, like I tend to not feel as satiated as other people. It's actually called the fat gene, well, FTO, but scientists call it the fat gene just because it's associated with eating more and like gaining weight. Um, so when I knew that, I was like, okay, I'm just going to start adding more protein. And I didn't measure it. I was just like, well, what could go wrong? And it's true. Like I just add more whole food protein. I eat more beans, more peanut butter, like a variety of proteins, and I am so much more satisfied. And it's more than is recommended, but I feel much better, and I don't have to snack midway through the day randomly because I'm hungry, and I have more lasting energy. So everyone is different, and it's okay to do things that are not what the general recommendations say. What do you have a story like that of what something you found that wasn't actually what is generally recommended, but you figured out what worked for you?
Ab- Absolutely. For me, I thought, well, I was consuming a hell of a lot more than I thought because obviously I used to be fully in the gym nonstop. So I had all these people being like, "Oh, you need this amount you need to be eating this amount. You need to be strong. You need to be all this." And these people are gym heads. That's all they know is protein. They don't think of anything else. So I was constantly consuming more protein than I think was even required for anybody's body. Just being like, and I was like, I felt very uncomfortable, like because if you're gonna eat 150 grams of protein, that there's going to be a chance that, especially if you're on Whole Foods, that you may be very bloated afterwards and wasn't feeling great, and it's just kind of wrecking my body as such, because I was taking in way too much. So I was taking in probably about 150, 160 grams, plus lowering any sort of like carb intake, any any type of fat intake, but you're like, oh, protein, 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 and then realize it's so far from the truth. And I put my body through all that stress and damage for absolutely nothing, because of me taking advice from somebody that wasn't kind of qualified to give advice. They'd just known what they picked up in a book, what they've been taught for generations. And this is how, and then obviously when you actually go and look into like the recommendations of protein, you actually need a lot lower than most people think you need. So all these people are like, oh, protein, like you need like 100 grams per day. You don't. You actually need a lot lower. Like just to be alive, it's your body weight in kilograms times by 0.9, or just round it up to one. And normally, if let's say you're 68 grams, if you're 68 kilograms, that's 68 grams of protein. That's actually not much. Um, and obviously, if you're looking to do, let's say, bodybuilding, or you're looking to build muscle, then yeah, up that's like 1.2, 1.3. And then there's people being like, oh, you need like 1.7. What's the point? It gets wasted. It gets wasted. The body gets rid of it somehow. Um,
Yeah, you're right. At some point, it really doesn't make sense to eat more. Like after, yeah, your body
yeah,
can't actually utilize it.
it's
But
just
it is,
expensive.
yeah.
Like
Well, unless you're eating beans.
yeah. That's the thing. You're just kind of you're eating your way. You're spending all this money
Mm.
eating more like 1.8, 1.9 grams of protein when your body's not using it. So if it's not being used, what's the point? You're just wasting something. It's just throwing money down the drain.
So the key takeaways so far are really that you're probably eating more protein than you think.
Hmm.
Um, the recommendations aren't necessarily what's right for you, and you need to really listen to your body, like see what works for you. Don't just take advice because someone is giving it to you. Um, you do need to vary your protein intake to get all the amino acids, but it's something you need to be aware of, but it's not something you need to be thinking about constantly. And tracking is extremely useful, especially if you're doing events, you're doing races, because it's incredibly easy to underfuel. And like you said, actually, as long as you're eating enough calories and you know your proteins, you're probably getting enough. What's one thing that our listeners, who are mostly runners, can do today or, this week to improve their vegan diet?
So first of all, if you are eating a diet full of like the more processed vegan foods, then I would say, for instance, let's say you're going to make a shepherd's pie. Replace your vegan mince, replace it with lentils, replace it with something a bit more whole foods. Um, Put a mixture of different vegetables in it just to kind of mix up your requirements. Just have a bit of fun with it. Um, if you don't like it, you don't like it. And then try something new. But let's say it was a weekly thing, just exchange or Whole Foods, Whole Foodinize um, your what you're eating already. So, for instance, make a chili. Um, Instead of using obviously the mince as well, you'd use, let's say, black beans, lentils, maybe some like grated tofu in there, and just kind of play around with different flavors and spices. Don't just stick with these overly processed foods that are actually lower in protein. Because you see some of these things that, yes, they're a good, they claim they're an amazing source of protein, which is great, but they've also been stripped down to create this and gone through a processing period. So it's not going to be the initial strain that you would have had. It's been stripped apart and played around with. So getting a full and complete protein from whole foods, just try a new recipe once a week, maybe twice a week, and then slowly, slowly convert yourself. Maybe one meal a day, maybe a lunch, maybe a Buddha bowl, something like that. And then into your dinners, just veganize something that you love and just try make it whole foods. And there's thousands of recipes out there. Um, and you will feel a hell of a lot better as well. Like a hell of a lot
Okay.
better.
So your goal is to try just one new whole food vegan recipe per week and see how you feel.
Yeah,
Sounds
absolutely.
doable. I'm on it.
Perfect.
So, Callum, tell us more about your practice, where people can find you, how people can get in touch with you.
So I am Callum and I own Yumfu, which apparently someone had Yumfu on every other internet browser. So I'm now yumfu.life um, everywhere. So that is the website is yumfu.life. Um, Also, the Instagram is at yumfu.life. The Facebook is, I think that one's just Yumfu. Um, I think no one has that one. Um, and then am also on LinkedIn, but don't use it that much. So I will be on those four different platforms, sorry. But if you were to want the most content, it'll be Instagram or the website. Everywhere else, content is there, but it's not so in depth. So if you would like to follow, I'm there. And if you would also like to look into fueling your body with a whole foods plant-based diet, whether this be weight loss, this just being an initial transition from, let's say, an omnivorous diet to a plant-based diet, then I'm here for you to help you every step of the way in the healthiest way possible. And also helping bodybuilders and athletes thrive to the best of their ability on a whole foods plant-based diet.
Amazing. And I do recommend following Callum on Instagram because his content is great and you do really, really cool videos.
Oh, thanks.
Um, for anyone who is a runner, who is vegan, who is in the UK and not part of Vegan Runners UK, then I do recommend you join the club. It is a great club. It's very cheap to join. And there's lots of lovely people involved too. Callum, thank you so much for joining me. It's been great. And I'm sure we'll be speaking again soon.
Fingers crossed. I can't wait.
If you want to find out more about your body, maybe you're not ready to work with a nutritionist or a dietitian to personalize your diet and to work on your sport, but you want to learn more about your body, then I recommend a DNA test. And I sell them on my own website, which is vojo.health. And, you can find out loads about how your body works, which foods might work better for you, which not, and lots of other great information too. So head over there and read more about it.